My mom thinks every older woman in my life is trying to replace her, and it's exhausting. Hey everyone, first-time poster here, long-time lurker. I'm hoping to get some advice or perspective on something that's been really weighing on me lately. Recently, my mom moved in with me to help out with my kids. I made a big move across the country, and since I no longer have the support system I once did, having her here seemed like a good idea. For some context, she still owns her house in the town where we used to live, which she plans to keep as a vacation home or just a place to get away when she needs a break. Growing up with my mom was complicated, to say the least. For most of my childhood, it was just the two of us, which naturally meant we developed a very close, almost inseparable bond. But let's be real, it was also incredibly tumultuous. During my teenage years especially, we fought nonstop. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary for a mother and daughter to clash during that phase of life, but looking back, it felt like we were polar opposites a lot of the time. She fit that classic boomer stereotype in many ways, which made things even harder to navigate. Still, I love her deeply. Despite all the tension and the hurtful words exchanged over the years, there's a fundamental connection there, an undeniable sense of loyalty and love. But here's where it starts getting tricky. Now that she's moved in, things are definitely more difficult than I anticipated. I'm in my 20s, and over the years, I've built up a good group of friends who are older women, mostly in their 40s or older. These friendships developed naturally through work, living in the same neighborhood, or shared interests like hiking, fishing, or just grabbing drinks on a Friday night to unwind. I've always felt comfortable and at ease with these women, and I genuinely enjoy their company. There's something about their perspective on life that I really connect with. However, my mom has a serious issue with these friendships. Even before she moved in with me, I'd hear her make little comments like, "Your friends probably want to replace me since I was such a crappy mom." It always caught me off guard because I have no idea where this comes from. I've never spoken ill of her to anyone. Aside from the typical teenage gripes, like when I was 14 and would shout, "I hate you," during one of our many arguments, I know that teenage angst didn't paint the full picture, but it wasn't anything I took to others in a way that would cause this kind of reaction. But it doesn't stop with just my friends. My mom seems to get upset about any relationship I have with older women, whether it's with my aunts, my in-laws, or even female relatives on my husband's side of the family. It's like she assumes that any woman who's older than her is automatically trying to take her place in my life. I can't even mention these women around her without her spiraling into a rant about how they're trying to replace her or how she's never been the kind of mom I deserve. It's incredibly draining. I never know how to handle it anymore. She'll often bring up her feelings out of nowhere, and it completely changes the mood. I get that she has insecurities. After all, I can't imagine what it's like to have your child start forming close bonds with people you don't even know, but the constant negativity is really starting to wear me down. And the worst part is that I can't seem to get through to her. I've tried to explain that these women aren't here to take her place. They're just friends, family members, people who have offered me support when she couldn't, and it's nothing personal. But nothing seems to get through to her. It's like she just can't accept that my life has expanded in ways that don't include her in the same role she once had. There's a part of me that feels guilty because I don't want to hurt her feelings. But another part of me feels suffocated. I'm an adult now, and I shouldn't have to feel like I need to choose between my mom and my other relationships. I love her, but this behavior is exhausting. I can't even mention my friends or talk about my experiences with the women in my life without her making it all about her. I don't even know if this behavior has a name or if anyone else has dealt with something similar. I'm sure there's some deep-rooted issue at play here, whether it's insecurity, jealousy, or just the realization that she's getting older, but I don't know how to deal with it. It's not just the awkwardness of the situation, but the emotional toll it takes on me. Every conversation feels like walking on eggshells, and it's hard to enjoy my relationships with others when I know she might get upset or start accusing me of replacing her. Any advice or insight would be really appreciated. I'm starting to feel really isolated in this whole situation, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up without addressing it somehow. Thanks for reading. Update 1. First off, I want to acknowledge that we're not in a position to diagnose your mother. That's not what we're here for. However, it's pretty clear that there are significant signs of insecurity in her behavior, and I don't think that's a particularly hard conclusion to draw, given the circumstances. Now, since you've come to this sub, I want to give you a bit of a warning. The perspective you're about to get may sound harsh, even if it's not intended that way. A lot of us here have lived through difficult situations, some of us have survived abuse, and others of us have witnessed or supported people who've gone through it. As a result, our radar for red flags is pretty finely tuned. We may even pick up on signals that aren't truly red flags. Sometimes they're only orange or pink. but we tend to react based on our own experiences and how we've learned to interpret these behaviors. So please try to take this in the spirit of understanding, knowing where it's coming from. And what I'm hearing from you is that your mother seems to get upset when you talk about or even mention other women around her, particularly those who are about her age or those you might have the potential to get close to. When this happens, it's as if she perceives an implied criticism of her role in your life. She's internalizing this in a way that makes it feel like an attack on her, and from what I can gather, it's triggering a response from her that mirrors something we call DARVO. DARVO stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. And while this might not fit the classic mold of DARVO behavior, it still carries a similar dynamic. Your mother seems to be brushing aside any implied criticism and redirecting the focus of the conversation back onto herself, making you responsible for soothing her feelings and defending her actions. What's important to note here is the emotional manipulation at play. By repeatedly saying things like, "Oh, I was such a bad mother," she's setting up a situation where you feel responsible for her emotions. It's a tactic that puts you in the position of having to apologize, empathize, or explain away the past. As a result, you find yourself unable to have a real conversation about what you actually want to discuss. The topic of your friends or relationships with other women gets derailed because in these moments, her emotional needs take precedence over your own. This might eventually lead you to avoid discussing these relationships altogether, or even avoid spending time with the people who might be important to you. You could find yourself walking on eggshells, trying to dodge the situation or minimize the possibility of upsetting her. This dynamic over time can even lead to isolation, where you may end up distancing yourself from these relationships to avoid conflict with your mother. It's a tactic that abusers often use, whether intentionally or not, and it's often a part of what's called coercive control. Isolation is a powerful tool in controlling someone, and it's subtle enough that over time it can be difficult to recognize or even fight against. I also took a moment to look through your posting history to better understand the situation. I noticed a detail that stood out to me. If your mother has been using your address without your knowledge, that raises some additional concerns. It's especially troubling given her plans to turn her old home into a vacation property. While vacation homes are certainly not uncommon, they come with their own set of risks. Structures that remain unoccupied for long periods of time tend to deteriorate quickly, and unless proper care and maintenance are taken, things can go downhill fast. I'm particularly concerned about this as winter approaches because neglecting a property during colder months can lead to expensive and sometimes irreversible damage. Now, I understand that having your mother around to help with childcare is a huge benefit, but I'd strongly recommend you make sure her house is being properly looked after, especially if there are any plans for her to use it as a getaway. It might sound like a small detail, but taking care of that now could prevent a lot of issues in the future. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're both stuck. If things get worse with her living situation or with her emotions, it's crucial that you both have a safe place to go. The old saying about an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure is especially true in this case. Taking the time to ensure that her home is being maintained properly could save you both a lot of stress and potential headaches down the road. It's a lot easier to manage these things early on than to deal with the fallout later. Again, these are just my thoughts, but I hope they offer some clarity. Please don't feel pressured to act on everything all at once, but take a step back and assess how much emotional labor you're really carrying. Your needs and your relationships matter too, and it's okay to prioritize those even when dealing with difficult family dynamics. Update 2. Have you had an honest conversation with her about how her overwhelming insecurity is affecting your relationship? Have you told her that if she keeps up this behavior, it's only going to push you further away? It's crucial to lay it all out on the table, but I understand that might feel impossible if she's not open to hearing it. So I have to ask, do you truly need her living with you, or are there other solutions you could explore? It sounds like you're dealing with a very complex and emotionally taxing situation. If this relationship is something you feel is worth saving, or at least worth trying to salvage, then it may be time to get professional help. A therapist could guide both you and your mom through the process of setting healthy boundaries, along with the consequences of violating them. This is not going to be an easy journey, but it's possible if you're committed to making it work. You might even want to consider writing her a letter to clearly express your feelings. This way, you're not just telling her, you're showing her exactly how her actions make you feel. Words are powerful, and sometimes a letter allows you to put everything down without interruption, giving both you and her the chance to process it more thoughtfully. If she's open to it, Offering to help her find her own therapist could be a powerful next step. She needs to address these insecurities before they end up destroying the connections she has left, including her relationship with you. If she's unwilling to see this, it's likely that things will only continue to spiral downward. The truth is, without acknowledging her own issues, she'll keep repeating the same patterns that are causing the tension between the two of you. I also want to emphasize something that's easy to overlook. Your children are watching these interactions. Even if you think they're too young to understand or too distracted to notice, they're absorbing the dynamic. What kind of example are you setting for them? Do you want them to think that this is what a parent-child relationship should look like? Do you want them to think it's okay to treat you the way your mom is treating you? It's not just about you and your mother anymore. It's about breaking this cycle for the sake of your kids. You might not even realize the extent to which your children are picking up on the tension between you and your mother. They might be sensing the discomfort and unease, and that could have a long-term impact on them as they grow up. In my experience, when children are in the middle of these kinds of emotional struggles, they begin to internalize unhealthy relationship dynamics. So even if you think they're too young to understand, they are likely feeling the strain. And let's be honest here, your mom hasn't really dealt with her insecurities, has she? It sounds a lot like my own mother, whose first reaction to any challenge is anger and defensiveness. That's emotionally exhausting, isn't it? It wears you down, and over time, it makes you question whether anything will ever change. Unfortunately, if she doesn't face her issues head-on, the pattern will keep repeating itself. And let's be real, she probably won't take responsibility for her role in all this because she's too caught up in the belief that she's not the problem. I've been in your shoes. My mom has been jealous of my close friendships for as long as I can remember. It's something that's taken a toll on me over the years, and I can't tell you how draining it is to constantly adjust your behavior to try and avoid confrontation. But here's the thing, you can only do so much. You can set all the boundaries you want, but when someone refuses to acknowledge their own issues, it's like trying to fix a leaking faucet with duct tape. It's not going to hold. One thing that might help, and I know it's going to be tough, is to have her go back to her own home. She could still visit, but perhaps a few weeks every so often, rather than living with you full-time. Giving her space and giving yourself space is essential for you to regain some control over your life. This will give you the ability to set boundaries in a way that's not constantly challenged by her being under the same roof. It's hard to build healthy boundaries when you're constantly in close proximity to someone who refuses to acknowledge their behavior. The reality is that setting those boundaries is going to be incredibly hard, especially with her living with you. But it's necessary for your own well-being and ultimately for the health of your family. You deserve to live your life without feeling like you're constantly walking on eggshells or like you're responsible for managing her emotions. You are allowed to have your own space, your own relationships, and your own happiness. So I suggest considering a gradual shift in the dynamic. Let your mom stay in her own space more often, allowing both of you the room to breathe. It may not fix everything, but it's a step in the right direction. Building these boundaries will give you the chance to live your life, rather than constantly trying to manage the tension around you. I wish you the best of luck. This process isn't going to be easy, but I believe that with time and determination, you can create a better, healthier environment for yourself and your family. Update 3. You mentioned that your mom relocated across the country to help you with your kids, which is a big move. But I can't help but wonder, does she have any connections in the area? Is she familiar with anyone other than you? Or does she have any hobbies or activities that she enjoys, especially ones that involve other people? Or is it possible that she feels isolated, seeing you surrounded by your friends and other relationships while she has nothing of her own in this new place? It's tough because in situations like this, it can be easy for someone to start feeling left out or overlooked, especially when they've uprooted their life for someone else. Your mom may feel disconnected and lonely, and that could be fueling some of her emotional responses. Sometimes when we feel alienated from the people around us, it can stir up feelings of insecurity or inadequacy that manifest in strange ways, like making accusations or comments that don't really reflect the truth. So, I wonder if part of what's behind her behavior is that she's struggling to find her own sense of belonging in your life. The best way to really get to the heart of it is to talk to her directly about it. I'm not suggesting you dismiss her comments by saying, "Oh, that's not true," and brushing it off. What I'm recommending is that you sit down with her, one-on-one, over a cup of coffee, and have an open and honest conversation. This isn't just about telling her she's wrong, it's about truly understanding where these feelings are coming from and offering reassurance. Let her know that you love her, that she's your mom, and that no one is trying to replace her, especially not your friends or the people she feels threatened by. Create a safe space for her to talk about her insecurities. See if you can uncover whether her comments are rooted in guilt over how she raised you, or if they stem from something else entirely. Perhaps loneliness or jealousy of the relationships you've built in your new life. It's important to approach this conversation with empathy, not just as a way to defend your boundaries, but also as a way to truly hear what's behind her behavior. It's starting to feel like she's offloading her emotional baggage onto you, expecting you to manage her feelings for her. This kind of emotional burden can be overwhelming to carry, especially when it's someone so close to you who refuses to acknowledge their own vulnerabilities. If she's depending on you to fix her emotional state every time she feels insecure, it can leave you feeling exhausted and suffocated, unable to have the kind of relationships you need in order to thrive. There's another factor that's really concerning to me, which is that you've mentioned your other relationships are beginning to suffer and your home life is becoming less peaceful. That's not just about you and your mom. It's about how her presence is affecting the balance of your entire household. If this is starting to cause tension with your husband or any other relationships you have, it might be time to take a hard look at whether or not you're ready to open up that conversation with him. I'm not assuming how he feels, but it's important to be prepared for the reality that he might not be fully happy with the current living situation. It can be really difficult to address something like this with your partner, but it's important to remember that his perspective matters too. If you choose to open up this topic, you may have to be ready to hear things you might not want to hear. It's a risk that comes with inviting open, honest discussions, especially about something as emotional and potentially divisive as this. This is definitely the kind of conversation that could benefit from a neutral third party, someone who isn't directly involved, like a couples counselor. Having someone who can mediate the conversation could make a huge difference. It allows you to express your feelings without the fear of unintentionally hurting someone, and it gives your mom the chance to express herself in a way that's more constructive. Sometimes a counselor can help draw out the deeper issues that might be driving these behaviors, while also teaching both you and your mom how to communicate more effectively. It's not about fixing everything overnight, but it can create a space for healthier dialogue and help you find a way forward. Having an uninvolved third party help guide these difficult conversations could give you and your family the tools you need to navigate this complex dynamic. When emotions are running high, especially with family, it's easy for misunderstandings and hurt feelings to escalate quickly. A counselor can act as a buffer to help keep things from getting too personal or reactive, which can make the process of addressing your boundaries and emotional needs feel less like an emotional minefield. Ultimately, this conversation with your mom, along with the one with your husband, might be the first step in finding the right balance for everyone involved. I know it's going to be difficult, but setting healthy boundaries while also taking the time to understand where everyone is coming from could lead to a more peaceful and fulfilling home life for you, your mom, and your entire family. Update 4. It seems like your mom has gained some perspective recently, particularly when it comes to her role as a parent. Maybe she feels guilty for not being the mom she thinks you deserved. There's likely an undercurrent of insecurity too. She might be second-guessing her actions, reflecting on her past choices, and wondering where she went wrong. Moving in with you could be her way of trying to rebuild and strengthen your relationship. It's a chance for her to create something more meaningful between you two, something that may have been missing before. But at the same time, it's clear she has a lot of fear around this. She seems to be worried that your friendships are a sign that you're moving on from her, that you're closing a door on your connection with her and finding new people to replace her. It's interesting that she's so convinced that any woman who befriends you is automatically trying to take her place or be a stand-in for her. There's something deep-seated in that belief, a reflection of her own anxieties about her place in your life and the possibility that she might lose her sense of importance. At the same time, there may be a hint of truth in her fears. It's not unusual for people to bond with others based on shared experiences, group identities, or similar needs. You've had a void to fill, and so have some of your friends. Maybe they've helped you in ways she hasn't been able to, offering a kind of support or understanding that she couldn't provide when you were growing up. That could make her feel even more like an outsider, especially if she perceives those friendships as something that diminishes her role in your life. However, what's troubling for her isn't just these other relationships, it's the sense of competition she feels. She likely believes that any new friendship you form is a challenge to her role as your mother, something she can't easily compete with. It's almost as if she feels threatened by these women in your life, seeing them as potential replacements rather than just friends who enrich your experience. She might be struggling to see how the two of you can have a fulfilling relationship if she's not in control, if she's not the one who's able to provide guidance or act as an authority figure in your life. That's where the tension lies. For you and your mom to find harmony, she would need to let go of the idea that her role in your life must always be one of authority. Instead, she needs to come to terms with the idea that you two could have a more equal, peer-like relationship. It doesn't mean you stop loving her or that she has to stop being your mom, but it does mean letting go of old dynamics and embracing a new, more balanced kind of connection. That could be a breakthrough for both of you, but only if she's open to it.
The key to this working out is for her to relax and stop viewing every new person in your life as a threat to her. If she can learn to take a genuine interest in people, regardless of their age, gender, or relationship to her, she might find that there are opportunities for her to connect with others in ways she's never explored before. This could be a revelation for her, a chance to break free from the narrow expectations she's placed on herself and others. It could allow her to create friendships of her own, based on shared interests and mutual respect, without feeling like she's competing for your attention or love. In order for her to become less uptight about your friendships, she'll need to start developing relationships of her own. If she finds common ground with people outside of her role as your mother, she might begin to understand that there's plenty of room for both her role in your life and your relationships with other people. By establishing her own connections based on things she enjoys or interests she's passionate about, she'll start to feel more secure in her place in your life. This doesn't mean she'll stop being your mom, but it will help her see that she doesn't need to rely on you as her only source of emotional support. It's all about shifting the dynamics and allowing both of you the freedom to develop independently while still maintaining a strong bond between you. Ultimately, this could be an opportunity for both of you to grow. She has the chance to learn how to let go of the past and embrace a healthier, more balanced relationship with you. You, in turn, have the chance to create the space for her to find her own identity beyond just being your mom, someone who has her own interests, her own friends, and her own sense of purpose. This change might take time, but if both of you are committed to working through the discomfort and confusion, it could lead to a much stronger, more fulfilling relationship for both of you. Update 5. I finally had the chance to sit down and talk things through with my husband. Overall, he and my mother have a good relationship, and he understands that we need her help with the baby at this stage. Given our current situation, it feels like having her around is the best option for us, especially when we compare it to the costs and logistics of daycare. But while he agrees that having her here is beneficial in many ways, he did bring up a couple of concerns that I hadn't fully considered. First, he mentioned that he's noticed a shift in the behavior of our older child since my mom moved in. He seems to act out more, and while we aren't sure of the exact cause, we suspect it might be a combination of things: the change of environment, the move, the arrival of a new sibling, or perhaps even something in my mother's comments and attitude that's affecting the home dynamic. My husband isn't sure if it's just typical adjustment behavior or if there's something deeper going on. But whatever it is, it's starting to feel like a point of tension for all of us, especially since it's not clear what's driving the change. The second point my husband brought up is something I've been feeling too, but hadn't fully articulated. He mentioned how much more tense I've become since my mom arrived. I've noticed it myself. There's a constant sense of stress when she's around, and I'm much more withdrawn than I used to be. He's worried that it's becoming an additional stressor, and it's affecting my emotional availability in a way that's impacting our relationship. I think part of me has been in a constant state of hyper-awareness, trying to balance being a good host and helping my mom settle in, all while trying to maintain my own peace of mind. But it's hard, and I'm starting to feel overwhelmed by the strain of it all. After we talked, we both agreed that counseling would be a good next step. We have a family therapist already, mainly because our older child was struggling after being bullied at school, and we wanted to help him build his confidence. It was incredibly helpful for him, and I think it could be beneficial for us as a family, especially now that we're all living together. We're considering starting with a few sessions just for the two of us so we can get on the same page and work through some of these issues together. Once we've made some progress, we're hoping to involve my mom in the process as well. I think it could help her feel less defensive and more open to the conversation, especially if the focus is on improving communication and finding better ways to coexist peacefully. However, I'm nervous about how my mom will react to the idea of therapy. She's so sensitive, and I fear she might see it as another attack on her, another criticism or slight. I really don't want to feed into her insecurities or make her feel like she's being rejected. At the same time, I don't want to avoid addressing the issues either because they're starting to affect our home life in a way that can't be ignored. My mother wasn't an awful parent, but she definitely has a lot of insecurities. And it's hard to navigate how to approach this without making her feel like she's being blamed for everything.
To answer your questions, no, I don't need her here, but her presence is such a huge help. She's been amazing with the kids, taking care of them, helping out around the house, cooking and cleaning. It's made a huge difference in terms of managing everything, especially with the baby. Her support has allowed me to focus on other things without feeling like I'm drowning in tasks, which has been invaluable. I've been in therapy for many years, mostly for anxiety, and a lot of our sessions focused on my relationship with my mom. My therapist and I came to the conclusion that it's worth trying to build a stronger relationship with her, especially because there wasn't any significant history of abuse or major issues between us. We both agreed that while my mom isn't perfect, there's potential for improvement if we both work at it. About a year ago, my mom went to therapy herself after a huge blow-up between us about boundaries and some of her boomer tendencies, which I found toxic. It was a turning point, and I think it opened her eyes to some of the ways her behavior was affecting me and others. But even though she took steps to improve, I still see those old patterns resurfacing, especially now that we're all living under one roof. You raised an excellent point about the example my children are seeing. That's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I've had some honest conversations with my mom about it. I've explained to her that while I don't think she was a terrible mother, I've chosen to raise my children differently based on how parenting has evolved over time. I've made it clear that I want to provide a different kind of environment for my kids, one that's more attuned to their emotional needs, one where they can have their own voice and be understood. It's been a difficult conversation, and I don't know if she fully understands my perspective, but I hope it's sinking in. I really appreciate the perspective you've offered here, especially the advice on counseling. It's exactly what we needed to hear, and I plan to go over these comments, as well as the resources others have shared, with my husband. We're going to discuss the next steps together, as we're both committed to figuring this out. Now that we're living together all the time, things have definitely gotten more tense than when we were only visiting occasionally. So your insight has been incredibly helpful in putting things into perspective. We're still figuring out how to balance everything, but I'm hopeful that with time, patience, and the right support, we can find a way to make this work for everyone involved. Thank you so much for your thoughtful advice and support. It really means a lot to us right now.